Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
And so it's taken longer than I would like, although I'm also at a very different level. But, I used the opportunity to write 2 books that are going to be coming out in this year. I've reconnected and had a lot more time to network and hang out with friends. And so I do live by the philosophy of living with no regrets. But, this one, will have a heftier hit to the pocketbook than an alternative decision.
Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Joined today, she's a speaker, author, executive leader. It's Victoria Pelletier. How are you doing today, Victoria?
Hello, I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
Oh my gosh. So where am I from? I'm originally from Canada. So your listeners will hear that only when I say 2 words, out and about. They'll give me away for sure. And that I play ice hockey. So I grew up in Western Canada, but got relocated right out of college to Toronto. And I've been between Toronto and New York ever since. And then I'm one of the many people who moved to South Florida during COVID because I could and because we were remote. And what did I like to do growing up? So I've always been an avid reader and listener to music and a big sports person. I played volleyball, basketball growing up, and then picked up multiple other sports since then.
With being an avid reader, growing up, was there any specific genres or types of books that were very passionate for you?
So I was somewhat advanced and I read and listened to things well before my age. And I'm going to say that because I was reading Stephen King when I was 10 or something like that. Yeah.
I don't think I was ever reading Stephen King at a young age. See, I was more of the biographies because at least it kept me interested, learning about someone than the fiction or kind of that drama or adventure kind of mysterious kind of books.
Yeah, no, and it's not the genre I would listen to today, but as a child, I enjoyed it.
With all the different sports that you mentioned, was there one that was really your favorite? Something that really caught your eye? You learned a lot about yourself playing that sport.
Yes, but not until my 20s.
Oh,
So I started playing hockey because my ex played hockey and I had skated before. I just never done it with a hockey stick in my hand. And so I started playing and I loved it. One, it was something we were doing together, but the team dynamic, and for me, this pushed me into discomfort zone in that I'm, an A-type personality who generally doesn't enjoy doing things I don't perform well at.
mhm.
But hockey was the exception for me. I was never the worst player on the team, but when I first started playing, I was in the bottom third for sure. But I kept at it and continued to, and happy to say that, and I haven't played in a couple of years because I had a bad accident not playing hockey. But when I retired and hung up the skates, I was at least in the top third. So that, I love doing it for a whole host of reasons, but it was one that actually just tested who I am and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, but still having fun.
Was it hard with that relationship when separated and still enjoying playing hockey? Did you ever lose that interest, or it kind of was well, that person's not in the picture anymore. I'm just going to keep going.
So I'll tell, so I was married to a woman before being married to my husband. And so interestingly, we played in a co-ed league initially, and then we moved to playing in a women's only league. Never had more injuries until I switched playing women only. They're
Oh,
nasty.
wow.
Yeah. And when we separated, it did cause some issues. I mean, we were even on the same team. So it was really uncomfortable in the change room. And we had children together. I gave birth to our 2 children while we were together. And so, I mean, we tried to make sure it was always good, but there was some discomfort for sure. And then after the end of that season, we are playing on separate teams, but our kids both played hockey. So we still had to be in the arena together, supporting and cheering them on.
Was sports growing up something that was very helpful from kind of focusing on that than what was going on maybe in the household or what was going on at school? It kind of got your attention somewhere else than maybe what you were going through.
Um, a little bit in that. So I'm adopted, and I was adopted out of a difficult situation, and and so and I was gifted, but who knew where that came from in the DNA, given where I came from. And so actually I was made fun of for being like really gifted, teacher's pet. Like the teacher would just put me to the side to do different work. I think they didn't know how to handle it. And it got better after I skipped 2 grades because I'm also hit my height by the time I was 10. So like I just stuck out like a sore thumb all around. Sports for me was a way, and I was a bit of a loner. And so moving into team sports helped, and my height. So I'm only 5'8", but I hit this height by the time I was like 10. So I
Wow.
was always the tallest for long, long time. So it made me really popular playing volleyball and basketball in an era in which I was still pretty insecure about myself. I didn't have a massive friend group. And so it was a great place to go and then like feel better and part of something when I was otherwise somewhat ostracized for other reasons outside of that.
With having that team dynamic, do you see where yourself today, you kind of have that confidence with talking to people, making friends, where how hockey or sports dynamic has played a big part in that growth for you?
Well, I've been a leader in business for a long time. And so leading people, I've learned a lot through leading and subsequently even coaching like sports teams. And actually, they're very similar in terms of how, again, you find certain skills and
Yep.
bring people together for the right fit, the way you need to coach performance. And people show up their whole selves. So there's drama that comes in from about like, how do you deal with those? All of those things are very, very similar from a sporting context to like the business world.
What was that dream job for you? Sometimes we're asked that fun question growing up. What was that dream job?
Uh, I knew exactly what I wanted to be from probably age 11. I wanted to be a lawyer. And I think it's because my mom had me watch LA Law with her. And like I was young, but I just saw that, and it's dramatized, of course, this, but that's what I wanted to be. And then funny enough, when I was in university, you have to get an undergrad before going to law school. And so when I studied psychology and like some pre-law courses, because I thought it would help in the world of law. But then I actually worked in a bank throughout university and got promoted up fairly quickly and into a leadership role. And it was like very early stages. They wouldn't call it digital transformation. We're talking 25, 30 years ago almost. Early days of that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a year off before I go to law school because I loved like the challenge in this corporate world and I loved that I was a leader. And so I never went to law school.
Wow. It's kind of
I
crazy how
know.
that 1 year made a huge transformation in that journey that you went on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Although I believe you need to like follow your passion and the stuff that brings you joy. And I was loving what I was doing.
It kind of sounds like when one door opens, it can take you in a different direction. Like
Yes.
your path was to be a lawyer, but something great happened and you got to still follow and enjoy that new path.
Yeah, exactly. I believe a lot in what I refer to as strategic intentionality. So being strategic around whatever goals, objectives, your brand, whatever it is, and then be intentional around the steps you take towards that. However, give yourself the freedom to kind of go with the flow as, things pop up and arise, and because you never know where it will take you.
With being a lawyer, a lot of times schooling does play a big part as that's the main focus. Did you ever find anything in your personal journey that you enjoyed or something fun that new that you found? You talked about how sports played a big part. You had the passion with the job aspect of going on. Did you find anything new or any challenges that kind of excite you?
Well, there's a word I put in my email signature line to in part to describe me, multi-potentialite. And so that means I have a very diverse set of like passions and interests. And so you'll see that manifest in the fact I have almost always had a side hustle in addition to being a corporate executive. And those were passion projects that somehow grew into a business. To just, I would describe myself now beyond the what I do for work and board and that kind of thing as, a traveler, a music lover, a foodie, a wine lover, a people watcher, like all these things. And so there's not one. And in fact, also like all of it together, it's all just life. And I just integrate them in a way that it's a little bit here one day, a little bit there. And then, oh, I'm like shiny new object over here. Let me go and explore this a little bit more.
You talked about your journey in the corporate world. What was the most rewarding part about being in the corporate world?
I my vision of how I would define success changed dramatically from, let's say, in my 20s when I became an executive to a real shift I saw noticeably in my 30s to where I sit today. And and it is about being, I refer to it as a whole human leader. And so the opportunity to identify potential in people and help coach and mold. And they might come only with like 7 of the 10 skills that are needed. But because they're good performers in the work that they do, and they have great potential and maybe very diverse experience, I'm going to take it upon myself to help bridge that gap from 7 to 10 with them. And doing that, that's the kind of thing that I love about being, a leader in business. And by extension, beyond that, I've now, achieved, senior levels in business that's given me a greater platform. And for me, that platform is around things like advocating for social justice and equity, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And having built the platform to where it is, that's given me the opportunity to do more of those things and moving the needle. That's when I think about legacy and what I would want to be known for. It's more that now than how I used to define it.
With being executive, challenging opportunities or tasks are been upon you. How do you see yourself as a leader? If someone had to describe you in a few words as a leader, what would those words be? And how have that played in your role as you keep growing within the work?
It's changed over time. I think, I didn't always show up as my authentic self, and I got certain nicknames that weren't really representative of who I was, but it was how I showed up. Now the team would describe me like, uh, they'd probably first of all say, to be succinct, like I'm tough, but I'm fair. So I set really like a high standard for everyone that I uphold to myself, but I'm also very fair in how we achieve that. The whole human leader, again, my word, I think they would say that like I've brought strong performance of business. I've got nicknames like Turnaround Queen and CEO Whisperer, just my ability to like improve business performance and have a C-suite listen to me. But they'd say that I'm bold. I challenge the status quo. Like I am fiercely like loyal, to particularly to my team, and that I operate with radical candor.
Were you able to kind of keep the balance between professional and personal to where everything you've described, it's like very high level, a lot of hours put in, a lot of work put in. How has that balance been for you?
Uh, I, I think I actually I'm going to say I hate the question, Alex, but it's only because people ask me, how do you do it all? And it's like, you can have it all, not always at the same time, and recognize that it comes with compromise and trade-offs. And so for me, I've never compromised, even though I knew from a very early age, I wanted to be a mother. So I gave birth to my first child even before my 24th birthday. Um, and yet I became an executive a few months after my first son was born.
Wow.
And I was back at work. And so that was a choice I made to do that. Now I had a very supportive partner. When our second one came around, we had a nanny. So, but and I think there's times when I talk about trade-offs. I think of when my younger one was 2 years old. I remember, for tax purposes, I spent 220 days on the road that year. And then I would come home and recognize like my youngest was speaking in full sentences and I'd missed a lot during the week. However, I like fast forward to many years later. Unfortunately, my ex-wife passed away from cancer, and who would be with the children when I traveled. And so after she passed away, I was on the road still probably like 18 business days a month. And so I had to make a choice. I loved the job that I was in, but I was New York based was my job, but we had a residence in Toronto and I would go back and forth, and I needed to make a choice. Do I move the kids, which is not a great decision for them, doesn't solve for all the travel, or do I make a decision to leave my company and find a role Toronto based with less travel? And that's the choice I made. And so trade-offs you make at the right time for for you personally, for your family, and for your career.
Is that something that you would teach your kids as they're older? That kind of same mentality of trade-offs and the things that you experience with battling your decision as a businesswoman, but also being a mother at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and a few other things. I have this one saying where there's conviction, there's capacity. So it's another reason for me, don't ask about like work versus life. It's all just life. So
Mhm.
for me, I've chosen a way to integrate it, and it does come with choice and compromise. But what I would also tell my children or others is to follow the path that brings you personal and professional joy and value. So in doing whatever all is for you or that you're interested in, for me, that's meant I say no to the things that don't bring me joy or value. And some stuff still has to get done. Like my house still needs to be cleaned, but then you choose to delegate or outsource to someone else to do that, both personally and professionally.
As an executive, this is kind of a future question. Is there a point or a goal that you want to hit in the executive world that you haven't done yet or you haven't experienced that is exciting for the future for you?
Yeah, I've been a CEO before, but it was of a smaller company. So my goal would be, and I'm in career transition right now. I made the decision to leave my last company in the summer. So as I'm looking for that next one, ideally it will be, CEO of a larger company with the next step beyond that to be CEO of a large publicly traded company. That's what I've got on my path for me.
Was it hard to make that career transition recently that you've gone through in the summer? Was it hard to make that decision to find the next chapter for you?
It's y- yes and no. It wasn't exactly the best fit for me, which I knew fairly early on. Unfortunately, they recruited me fairly hard, and I think I came in being told one thing and it was another. And so I did my best to make it work for almost a couple years. So I knew I wasn't the joy I talk about wasn't there. I did think I was going to be stepping into another role pretty quickly. So in my past, I generally would tell people like, don't quit a job till you have another one to go to,
Yeah.
which I should have followed the advice, although I was far down the path on a couple of opportunities. And so the market's been not amazing. And so it's taken longer than I would like, although I'm also at a very different level. But I used the opportunity to write two books that are going to be coming out in this year. I've reconnected and had a lot more time to like network and hang out with friends. And so I do live by the philosophy of like living with no regrets. Um, but this one, will have a heftier hit to the pocketbook than an alternative decision.
You talked about you wrote two books. Talk about that experience. When was the moment you're like, I'm ready for to do this? I want to write a book. I want to experience that.
I co-authored a book back in, I think, 2017 or something. So it was just one chapter though. And so I knew I was planning to write at least one full like book myself. And the impetus for me was a colleague of and friend of mine. He decided he too left the company that we'd been working for. He left a few months before myself, I believe, and he wrote a book. And he interviewed me for it, and I'm like, "This is so amazing! Like, I love this." And I'm like, "When else am I going to have time and capacity to do it?" So then I said, "Well, I've been talking about it. Do it now." And the only reason it's two books was because I was struggling between two topics. So the first one is on personal branding that will come out. It's one of the things I'm asked to like coach and give keynotes on quite a bit. And the other is around leadership and culture. So I decided to do both, but what was the experience like? Way more difficult than I expected. And even I recorded the audio for the first book that's coming out. Even though I'm a speaker, like this was being locked in my closet, which I have like soundproofing around. I made it like my makeshift like recording studio. And like sometimes it would take me like 6 to 8 times to read a page because I'd get near the bottom and I'd mess up a word. So some of those things were like amazing learnings, but like I'm so glad I did it.
Have you had people kind of review it or react to maybe like a sample of it before?
Yeah, I actually I gave advanced reader copies to some friends and I said I'd love for you to read it. And assuming you like it, I'm like, but I would like ratings as soon as it's officially released. And so they do have that. And then, but many people are like me. I actually prefer to ingest most of my books now by audio.
Mhm.
And so I was able to give access to a link for a few people to listen to it on audio. So I was with a whole bunch of women yesterday who have it, and they many of them are preferring listening to it just sort of in the cadence that it's not only they're my words, but being read by the author in the way in which I intended. So it's been great. So early feedback is positive. I didn't do it to get rich. I would just hope I can even cover, some of my costs. It's more to solidify myself as like a subject matter expert in this space, as a thought leader, and help support as I do more like public speaking engagements.
We talk about the audio, and I feel like what you mentioned, audio is kind of that wave. You see the rise in podcasts, audio kind of videos that people can just listen to while they're driving in a car or taking a walk. And I think you can kind of hear the passion in the person's voice when they're speaking about the topic than reading on a page where you can't really tell. I mean, it's like almost like text messages. You can't really tell the emotions from a text message, or we think of a certain emotion and then we're completely way off. So, like you mentioned, the audio is perfect because just from you just talking about what you're passionate about and those kind of topics, it really shows when someone's probably hearing the book that you're sharing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Is it easier for you to talk about certain topics through the book, or do you see yourself going in maybe in a different direction with books, like a different kind of topic that maybe, but you mentioned kind of being a subject matter expert. Is it easier to write about that because you are well knowledged about it?
Uh, those were, and so I was able to like draw upon keynotes and articles I've written in the past. So there was a lot of raw
Mhm.
content. I don't know if, I mean, never say never. I don't know if I will do another one with these two that'll come out this year. I have been asked repeatedly to consider doing like some kind of a memoir, given sort of the adversity and the life and lots of like challenges that I faced. I still feel like I'm not quite ready for that yet. I feel like I'm not, I'm 48 in a few months, and like I feel like I need to be a heck of a lot older, or maybe I need to have achieved the CEO of a public company or whatever for me to do that. But that could be one out there. And that one I think will be incredibly difficult. And I'll probably have someone write it after interviewing me rather than me penning any of it.
Two words that really caught my eye when we initially were conversating about it was resilience and adversity you just mentioned. What do those two words mean to you, and what kind of impact has that had in your journey that you've been on?
So I've had significant adversity in my past, both at a personal level and a number of things professionally. And to be successful dealing with that level of adversity, trauma, and challenge, you need to be incredibly resilient.
Mhm.
And so I think it's um the resilience I have, and my best friend has nicknamed me Turtle, very nothing to do with my pace because I'm the opposite. Super tough exterior, but I'm like all soft and marshmallowy on the inside. So that is me. But I've learned how to develop an extreme amount of what I'll refer to as healthy level of resilience. So the non-healthy version, was me, as a child into my like early adulthood, just putting walls up. I'm not going to talk about my feelings and be vulnerable with you. I've got insecurities, like none of that's coming up. But and I would compartmentalize very well. As I learned how to be much more self-aware, self-reflective, start to model the thinking and the actions and behavior, and giving myself permission to fail as some of like the steps I would take to a more healthy way of being resilient. I've been able to apply that in every facet of my life. And so it's a very big part of what defines me.
What would you tell someone that's listening to this about if they're going through resilience or adversity, how to really kind of be strong about it and kind of challenge themselves and go through those obstacles?
Uh, in many ways. And so for me, this kind of like multi-step process, when something happens, like acknowledge it, feel the emotion, and then we have a choice in terms of how we're going to move forward. So for me, moving forward is often just anchoring back on whatever goal or objective I've set for myself, whether that's personally, professionally, a fitness goal, whatever. Like be very clear on what is the goal. And then the next thing is I do think an incredible amount comes from self-awareness and self-reflection. And I've never seen like a psychologist. My mom was very good at helping me learn how to be self-aware and self-reflective, but I think for other people, getting that professional support can help with not only the thinking and understanding of self, and then building the path in terms of how you start to take action. And sometimes it's modeling a very different, thinking process. So going through that, I said it's giving yourself permission to fail. And then also just recognizing it's one foot in front of the other. Like that is progress. You don't need to leap bound to, hit that goal next week, but just, giving yourself the space and permission just to move forward. The other thing I would say is surround yourself with people who are going to support you on
Yeah.
that journey. Like I've chosen no drama, like stuff's just going to happen naturally. I'm not going to invite people who are incredibly like drama riddled into my life. And so I want people that are going to be, really in that tightest of circles. The ones like I trust dearly, I tell them everything, and then they're there for me when I need. So I'd encourage people to find their own tribe.
When you're doing speaking opportunities, where is the main focus on those speaking opportunities usually towards? What are usually the clients or events focusing on?
Uh, I have a message that can go two different ways. A lot of them majority are corporate audiences, speaking to whether it's like their, women's groups or LGBT groups, or oftentimes it'll just be to like do a sales kickoff or kickoff for the year because there's a motivational component to it. So tends to be corporate events I speak at most part. And I'm talking around one of like there's 5 keynotes I give a majority of the time. One is called Unstoppable. That's the way I live my life. So I'll tell you a little bit of the adversity and trauma I've had and the journey since then and some of the lessons I've learned, to then talking about the future of work and the way we need to lead very, very differently. One is on personal branding and one's, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and being really intentional around that. And then sometimes I'm asked to meld a few of those together, depending on the very specific like audience. I do one on resilience alone, which is woven into kind of a couple of those.
Do you have that dream speaking event or an event that you see yourself wanting to do in the future? It's kind of like a fun question.
I've got a TEDx coming this year.
Cool.
But I want like the main stage TED, not TEDx. I want the big TED. And at some point I want them to approach me because I will just be such a thought leader or something out there. So that like, I'm going to like put that out there into the ether.
The big TED event happens. You're like, yeah, I don't need that thing is on the schedule. Nope, this is happening for you.
That's right.
Looking at your journey, what has been the biggest thing it's taught you about yourself?
Hmm. Um, well, that I am unstoppable. Uh, I I've lived that way, and people ask like, do you learn it? I think for me, there's innately in my DNA, there's something there. Fight or flight, I'm a fighter for sure. And the muscle that's been built around resilience for sure. But like, I feel like things have continued to get thrown at me year after year. And like each time it's like, okay, got it. Let's move to the next one. And so like truly this philosophy of like, nothing is going to prevent me from achieving the goals I've set for myself and being unstoppable. Like I have learned that incredibly. Not only do I sign most of my social media posts with that, like I live and breathe that philosophy.
I love that you talk about the words, how that has a big meaning for you. It's kind of like my title of my show, Rise to the Challenge. Like anything I do, I say that to myself because if I'm going to be talking about it, I got to believe it. I need people to believe that I'm believing in the show that I'm doing because why would I call it if it didn't have anything to do with me? So I love that even this when you mentioned the signature part, because every single person that sees your signature, they're going to see those words all the time and know that means value to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very much people completely associate that with me now, even though I didn't start using Unstoppable until actually that's the first book that I co-authored. They called it Unstoppable. And when they
Oh,
approached me,
wow.
I was like, wow, that's too coincidental. And so I fully embraced it ever since. And yeah, it's synonymous with me now.
Something our listeners like is to learn even more about our guests. When you're not working, when you're not doing the things that you love doing, what else do you like to do? What are the things you're doing on the weekends, on a night off? What are those types of things?
Well, it's very weird that I'm an empty nester. So as I said earlier, I had my children young, or at least the first one was before 24. The next one came a few years later. So they're out of the house now. At like they'll be 20 and 24 this year. And so that's odd. So that's even given much more time because I used to spend a lot of it doing activities with them. And so for me, we have an amazing like tight friend group that we hang out and go to happy hour far too often. So my liver is probably hurt there. Um, and I moved from New York to Miami Beach. And so being out all the time, like, so we're just walking, biking. I got a dog. It's been a long time. I had to force my husband to do it. I've always had them, but I used to travel so much, so I didn't have one. So we have one now. So Ashton, so like my fur baby, like, so he's
Oh.
coming with us all the time. And I'm also like a big foodie, so I like to like try new restaurants and discover like in new menus and things like that.
Do you have a local spot that's your favorite that you've experienced with the happy hours or the new eateries?
Uh, yeah, I mean we have our favorites for sure, and it's both a combination of good happy hour pricing and really good service. And so we tend to go like default to like one or two of those places. But my husband and I, unlike more of our friends, like they're ready just to go there all the time. We're like, no, let's try something new. So actually, we just went to the brand new French restaurant that just opened up, not too, on the weekend, which was great.
The final question I'll ask you for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
I will share, I have this like quote that I love, and actually I often have it at the end of like certain particular proposals that I do, personal ones for like coaching and on keynotes. It's by George Adair. It says, everything you've ever wanted lives on the other side of fear. And so when you talk about rising to the challenge, I believe that growth will not come if we are not challenging ourselves and if we're not stepping into the things that make us uncomfortable. And so I would encourage your listeners to get comfortable in their discomfort. And again, it could just be one step in front of the other, baby steps for now. And get it. You're the CEO of your own life. And so you can determine what that unstoppable version of it looks like for you. But again, be really comfortable with the fear, insecurity, and discomfort, because once you step into it, like such amazing things will come.
Victoria, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thanks for having me.
Tune in next time, hear my next guest talk about their rise to the challenge. Remember to follow and subscribe on all major audio platforms, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the full-length episode in video format. What path do you take to accomplish your goals? You decide.